Hi YouTube, long time no chat. Welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about the marathon. So welcome, sit down, grab your favorite beverage, and we will get into it. First of all, I want to apologize. This video is so delayed. To be honest and transparent, my dad's passing and grief has been a lot more apparent since the marathon has happened. I think it's a very fresh wound. It's only been 2 months, and I didn't have a lot of time to process my dad's passing, which was on September 19th, because the marathon was like right then. And so I focused a lot of my energy into running, and I didn't really allow myself a lot of time to heal. Not saying I'm healed at all. That's going to be a very long journey, but I think the past few weeks have been pretty tough for me, especially as we're approaching the upcoming holidays. And so I'm thinking of anyone who has lost a loved one and is going to have to sort of grieve through this holiday period. It definitely is something like I'm not looking forward to be honest. But I figured let's talk about the marathon. I got so many questions about how did I train for it, what I would change, how was the actual race day, what did I do with weed? So I wrote down all my questions and answers, and I'm super excited to share my experience because it was one of the best days of my life. And I feel like I still haven't, processed how profound the day was, how profound it was to prove that to myself that I could do it. I still don't really know how I ran 26 miles. Last weeks I've been walking around, I've been city biking, I've been, going over the bridge, and I'm like, how did I run 4 bridges and do that, 4 times and run 26.2 miles? No idea to me, but I'm very proud of myself. It was a very beautiful day, and let's chat about it. Background on the marathon, background on my running experience for anyone who's new here, just to set the scene. Okay, so I started running when I quit playing college volleyball, which was my junior year of college. I'm 25 years old now, so I've been running for about 4 to 5 years. Obviously, everyone knows how to run. It's an extension of walking, but I never was running by choice, we shall say, up until the past like 4 or 5 years. Every time we'd have to run in volleyball practice, it was used as a form of punishment. It was like killers, sprints, get on the line, you fucked up. And so I always associated running with that negative connotation of failure or like I did something wrong, which I've talked about before, and a lot of like athletes relate to that experience. So running wasn't used in my sport as well. Volleyball utilizes very explosive movement patterns, so there's no period of time when you are exerting energy in like an endurance capacity. You're never running laps, you're never running for more than 30 seconds. It's like be in the play, the longest rallies last like 2 minutes, then you reset, then you go again. So it's nothing like distance running, and so my body wasn't like trained to obviously do endurance, and so that's a skill that I had to rebuild once I got into running. A little bit. When I first started running, I just wanted to do something that was for me. I never had autonomy with a sport, obviously, because coaches are telling you, what to do in practice. Athletic trainers are writing you a program. I didn't get to choose any of that. I got to go to practice, do whatever the coaches and players and teammates wanted, but there was no point when like I could decide like, oh, I want to spend my time in practice doing this, or I want to do this type of workout. And so that was just a skill that I'd never utilized. And so when I quit playing college volleyball my junior year, I was so confused on like what to do. I was really confused about how am I gonna work out? I know I want to do activity. It's been a huge mental health thing for me to have an outlet like that. How am I gonna redefine like what movement, what activity is? And so when I first decided like, maybe I go on a run. I knew that I never wanted to set something competitive on running. I never wanted to sign up for a race, a 5K, a half marathon, a full marathon. I wanted to just do things from pure enjoyment. So when I first started running, I went from my East Village dorm back in like 2019 or 2018, I suppose. Yeah, time doesn't feel real. My first few runs in New York City, I was in my college dorm, and I was like, let's go on a run and see the Statue of Liberty. I've lived here for 2 years. I've been so busy with interning, babysitting, working, etc., that I've never had time to go see this. So I got my little corded headphones, got my old volleyball shoes, and I went on a run to the Statue of Liberty. Now I would classify this as more of like a walk jog type thing. I obviously didn't have the endurance to run for more than like 2 minutes. So there was a lot of stopping. There was a lot of sightseeing, acting like a little child in the city. I really remember this rush I felt of like, wait, I get to decide. I get to decide how fast, how far, if I stop, where I go, etc. And that felt like a really liberating thing that I was excited for. And I was really excited for what running could be in my life. I didn't really have any form of outlet. I did not want to go back to the gym. I had such just like a messy experience with like lifting and all of that stuff from college athletics, and I didn't want to be in that environment. So running felt like the only sort of like space for me to move my body. And so for 4 years, I was running with no watch. I wasn't caring about distance or time or pace. I had 1 pair of running shoes. Like I didn't have any of the tech and the gear that I have now, which is not necessary. I'm not imposing that. I'm saying that because I think on social media can seem like, oh, Kate's this runner, she has all this gear, she's been doing it. I'm still very much a beginner with running. I still don't know what I'm doing and I'm still figuring it out. Running has always been pretty recreational for me and it's only been competitive for the past year or so, but I do like this competitive side, but it took a lot of self-work and healing and growing to be in a place where I feel comfortable telling myself to go faster, to go harder, to compete again. I didn't have that at age 22. Like if I told myself, you have to go and do this, I would have freaked out and relapsed into my eating disorder. So it's been a lot of growth that has happened behind the scenes that has allowed for me to step up and run a marathon. Start working with Hoka in 2022. I'm signed as a global athlete ambassador. They have a list of races that you can sign up for. One of them is a Santa Barbara half marathon. I've never run a half marathon, but I've, run some cheeky 10-mile runs. And so I think I should sign up for the race, this would be an awesome first race experience. So I ran the Santa Barbara half last year, November 5th. It was on the same day as the New York Marathon. And it was a great experience. And I was hungry for more after that experience. I trained with this program that the actual race organization sent out. I don't remember what it was called, but they gave you a weekly mileage goal. And I just roughly followed that. November, after the half marathon, I thought, what if I did a marathon? So I signed up for the Big Sur Marathon, which I would have run in 2023. So this year in April. And I found the training block for that program from a app called Run Coach. Basically it's synced, I think it was like Strava or Nike Run Club, whatever. And it would create sort of workout plans for you to get to marathon ready, I suppose. So I followed that a little bit blindly and I'm not, outcrying the program. Maybe I fucked it up when I set up, but what I've concluded after getting injured off of that program is that it was way too fast, it was way too hard, there was not enough rest, there was not enough recovery, there was not enough strength training, and it was just not written well. I followed that program just because I had no other base of knowledge. It was 60 to 70 miles a week. I remember a lot of the speed workouts had me warm up for 2 miles before I even got into that intentional work. And so definitely that was what, led to my stress fracture. I was doing way too much, but I just thought that I'm running a marathon, I have to do this much. I had no idea. So retrospect, that program sucked. I got injured, got my stress fracture, fucking sucked. Worst experience. Well, there's been worse moments, but it was a really tough time just to have running stripped away from me. Running is also my job. Not being able to move around New York City from an accessibility perspective. I have a brother with disabilities and I know that he would probably not be able to live in New York City because of how inaccessible the city is, which just drives me fucking nuts. And so when I had my injury, I just was really thinking about ability and how inaccessible New York City is. So that was another pain point and frustration, and just not having the social aspect of being able to go work out with friends and community and host runs and whatever. That sucked. My first run club with Hoka, I was on a city bike in February and somehow 70 people showed up, but I was so embarrassed by the fact that I couldn't run. I think the biggest lesson I learned from that is that running is a sport. And I'm not saying that I never thought running was a sport, but I think running requires a team. It requires a support system. It requires resources and a network. I don't think you can be an island and run. After I'd been struggling to find physical therapy and all of that shit, one of my friends reached out to me and was like, hey, I had a really bad knee injury, and she's a fitness instructor. And she was like, I was put out of work for a long time and I found this physical therapist that really changed it for me. At that point, I was so desperate. I was like, I don't care. I will literally go to whoever. Called up Mike from Movement Minded Physiotherapy and I went in for an initial consultation and my life changed immediately. I think meeting Mike was probably one of the best things that has happened to me. Health, running, just generally this whole year. I really would not have run the marathon. I really would not have probably gotten into running again unless I met Mike because of how transformative my experience working with him was. And just so close. It feels like family when I'm there, and I've never had that support. Even when I was on college athletics teams, I didn't really feel like any of the trainers or coaches gave a fuck about me. And so to have someone in your corner that wants you to succeed is just so powerful. And so immediately when I met Mike, he takes a very holistic approach. He looks at the whole body. He looks at the muscular imbalances and things that you might have in your movement patterns that can be inefficient. He asked me a lot of questions about what my body was like when I played volleyball and what I felt like I was restricted in or what I felt like I was good in. And I kept being confused. I was like, I'm a runner. Why are you asking about volleyball? But obviously he wanted to know about my history and what things I struggled with and, different things that could impact how my running is now. And I'd never had that in-depth analysis of my running in my life. I'd gotten gait analysis, which is basically you just go and run on a treadmill and they kind of look at if you pronate, if you have weird strike patterns and stuff like that. But Mike was very curious about how I've moved my whole life and how we can make me move better. So I couldn't walk for about 4 weeks, and Mike has some of the early videos of me just stumbling. I could not walk from my knee. and he really helped me to figure out what was wrong. Not only just taking time off from this injury, but also working to fix what led to the knee injury. Turns out it was a lot of hips, it was a lot of feet. That's all I'm gonna say on Mike because he's a blessing. If you live in New York and you need a physical therapist, literally go to Mike. He has these like free 15-minute calls if you're struggling with anything. But after I met Mike, I was like, okay, like maybe I can run better than I ever have before. Now that I know how my body works, I know how I'm able to access my hips and things that I wasn't even aware of before. So fast forward a little bit, I think it's about March or maybe April. I think it's April. And I get an email from a friend of mine named Erin. And it's like, hey, Kate, I'm organizing the bibs for Planned Parenthood this year. You came to mind. I know you're currently injured, so maybe this is a no, but I want to offer you a bib to run the New York City Marathon this fall for Planned Parenthood. And I remember I got that email as I was, sitting, probably icing my knee or something like that, or doing hot therapy or cold therapy. And I remember looking at it and I was like, a marathon? You are so injured right now. But something deep in me knew that I had to say yes to this, okay? I called Mike, I called my mom, I called my dad, I called everyone, and I was like, I could run the New York City Marathon. And my mom's like, yeah, I don't know if you can run a mile, let alone a minute right now. What the fuck do you mean you're gonna run a marathon in November? But for context, I think it meant a lot more to me. This is a funny side tangent, but I thought I would share. When I was in high school and right after Trump was elected, the first Women's March happened in New York City. Obviously cringe, whatever, like the Women's March, problematic. But at the time in 2016, I was like, whoa, this is gonna be like a big moment in history. I wanna be a part of it. I begged my parents. I forced my parents. I was like, I'm flying out to New York City on January after the inauguration to attend the Women's March because I want to be a part of history. My mom's like, no, you're fucking not. My dad was like, no, you're fucking not. You are not going to a protest in New York City right after Trump is elected. Because it was at the time when like we didn't know what Trump was going to do. Like my dad was worried about like people being arrested, whatever. And like I've been protesting in Minnesota with like water groups and like feminist groups. So it was not something that they were scared of in terms of like me being at a protest alone. It was more just like, you're flying to New York City and you're 18, like girl. Somehow my little self was just persistent and I made it out to New York City and I ended up marching with Planned Parenthood for the Women's March. So that was one of my first moments like alone in New York. That was before I even moved out here for college. And so when I got the email that it was like to fundraise for Planned Parenthood, I was like, this is a full circle. This is closing the loop. We got to do it. So I talked to my physical therapist, Mike, a little bit because, we'd been working together for about a month. I was kind of at the point when I was able to walk again, but definitely not run. I was just starting to use the elliptical a little bit. Well, Mike, I was like, I want to do it. I want to do it. And if I can't run it, I have to pull out of it. Maybe that'll be embarrassing because I think I felt so much shame and guilt from pulling out a big Sur. But at the same time, I was like, I think this is going to be great. It's something I realized in retrospect is that when you're coming off an injury, it's really hard to recover if you don't have something as like a finish line, right? Like if you're just recovering to feel better, that's kind of like an arbitrary timeline. And so I knew that like I needed to get my shit together quickly to get ready for the marathon. And I think that really sped up the intention and discipline that I had with getting healthy and figuring out how to move my body again and how to recover. So I emailed back Erin and I said, yep, want to run the New York City Marathon. I'm in, I've got a physical therapist. I feel better about this. We'll think about training. And immediately she replied to me and she said, Kate, I have a run coach named Mary. Do you want me to provide an intro? And I was like, I don't even know what a run coach is, but I was like, yeah, sure. Like I will take any help I can get at this point, right? I think I'd been running isolated. I didn't really have a team. I didn't have a support system. I didn't have a network. So I was like, a run coach sounds awesome. Let's learn more. Run coach now, her name is Mary. Her Instagram is @itsmarython, which I think is so cute. And she works with anyone from like sub-3 people to just everyday average runners, like all paces, all abilities. And so Mary programs running programs for people and she also programs strength programs and it's very individual. It's like one-on-one coaching. And so when she told me a little bit about what she did, I was like, this is perfect. Like I will pay for this. I will sign up for this. Like this is an expense that I am so willing to do right now because I am so desperate to run and feel confident running and feel like I'm not going to get injured. So meeting Mary and meeting Mike and like having Erin provide this connection were like the best things that could have set me up for success in terms of getting to that marathon line. For the marathon, I still can't really walk. What does my training plan look like? So I get back into running. I do a few like casual, like 20-minute jogs just to make sure that my movement patterns are there. Mike is very much supervising a lot of my running to make sure that I feel confident in it once again. And so Mary starts writing out a very gradual progression for me to train for the New York City Marathon for 16 weeks. I'm not going to share any of my workouts or any of my training or strength stuff because that is something that Mary is specialized to do. That is a thing that I pay for, and I'm not going to give that out for free on the internet. But I understand a lot of people are like, how do you generally train for a marathon? So generally you're going to train for something like 16 to 18 weeks. Kind of how it looks is you're going to have some easy runs throughout the week. You're going to have like one speed workout a week or maybe two. Really what's going to be the biggest change of it, I guess, if you go from just casual running to marathon training, is this long run that will typically happen on a Saturday or Sunday. And this is where you're going to practice all the things like eating gels, water, what you're going to wear, how you're going to get through those mile blocks and sort of increase distance over time. The biggest thing that I learned is obviously you want to start really slow in terms of your base mileage, and you never want to increase your mileage more than 10% a week. That can lead to overuse, injuries. Trust me, you don't want to go down that rabbit hole. I was lifting twice a week. I was running a few days out the week. I had one intentional rest day. And so I was probably working out like 5 to 6 days throughout the week, but I've been an athlete my whole life. So that sort of volume wasn't anything shocking to me. If anything, my running was a lot less than when I was training for Big Sur. So it felt like such a relief. Also, the paces were a lot easier than I was doing with the Big Sur training block where I fucked up. So that was another thing that I learned. And then lifting became very important for me. Running is a single-legged sport. When you think about it, you are never on both feet at the same time. So if one of your legs, like let's say your left calf is really weak comparison to your right calf or right glute, vice versa, that will come up when you start to add mileage. You probably can get away with jogging casually throughout the week if you have these like crazy imbalances. We all have imbalances. We're humans, we're natural, whatever. But if you have some sort of like underlying imbalance, that's where injuries can come from. And so this past year, I've just become so much more body aware. In some ways where I'm like paranoid about how body aware I am, because I feel like I feel every little ache and wrinkle and stuff like that. But lifting with Mary, a lot of it is focused on single leg stuff. A lot of it is focused on movement patterns that I'd never done before. I'd lifted since I've been 12, right, with volleyball, but that's such a different movement. And so lifting for distance running was a new thing for me. And I'm very excited to be training for a spring marathon to also, continue to build on those lifts. But I think for me, the most interesting thing that I had to get to was that 20-mile run. So it's kind of, there's a lot of trains of thought on this in terms of marathon running of like, how far do you have to run to be ready for a marathon? Some people say it's 16 miles, some people say it's 23 or 22 miles. I ended up doing a 20-mile run. And Mary, was talking to me because I was going through a lot of shit with my dad dying right when I had that like long run. She's like, look, you can do 18. Your body's probably under a lot of stress. It's totally fine. And I was like, no, I need to see that 2 on my watch to know that I can do 20, because if I only run 18, I don't think mentally I trust myself to do 26.2. So that was just like more of a request from my end. And then with long runs, you learn about the fueling and hydration. You have to learn how to take the gels, and just become comfortable with that process of like running slow, training aerobically. It's such a new way of training, and I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed having like the weekly programming. Going from being like a very casual recreational runner to someone who is training for a marathon, I became much more disciplined again. And I think, like I mentioned earlier in the video, when I was at much less of a secure place mentally and just self-worth wise, I don't think having a marathon as a goal would have been good for me. It would have caused me to spiral. And if I didn't hit a certain pace, I would not eat. Like a lot of the restrictive things would have come up. But I think since I was in such a better place confidence wise, pushing myself wasn't scary. I'm not fearful of failure anymore, if that makes sense. I never question that I couldn't run the marathon. When I was on the start line and every part of the marathon, I was like, it didn't even come up that I wouldn't finish. I was like, no, I'm getting across the finish line. Like, what do you fucking mean? But 2 years ago, that would have not been the case. 2 years ago, evil Kate would have been on her shoulder like, you're not good enough, you look fat, like you can't do it. So it's become a journey to get myself to a place mentally where I was able to do the marathon. Someone also asked, what was the biggest difference you noticed like training for a half to a full? I think it's just discipline. It's more time on your feet. I am a content creator. I don't have a traditional 9 to 5, so I'm able to like work in my runs. I think it's very possible to run a marathon if you work a 9 to 5, but just like think about that. The long runs on the weekends are going to be extra long. Your easy runs during the week are probably going to be a little bit longer. So it might mean that you have to make more sacrifices to go to bed earlier and wake up earlier, but it's definitely doable. I don't want people to think you can't run a marathon because you have a full-time job. Like, I think when it comes to a full marathon versus a half, it just definitely requires more time and discipline to get all your workouts in. I asked about sacrifices like socially. So, the cat's out of the bag. I'm not much of a social butterfly, but I would say that this year has probably been the most social I've been in my life. Now that's all relative. When I say social, I mean going out once every 2 weeks and staying out till 1 a.m. But those are strides for me as an introvert. There's definitely times when I would go out till 3 a.m. and then have a long run the next day, but primarily as I got into marathon training, I decided that like every Friday, it's the bed. I'm going to sleep. Saturday night, maybe I would go out, like Sunday I primarily would like lift or do an easy run. So I find that, I have a lot of social needs that need to be met. As someone who works for myself, lives by myself, I'm talking to myself and this goddamn fucking camera and my phone all day. If I'm not seeing my friends and making time for social connection, my health's gonna plummet, okay? This goes back to the blue zones, it goes back to longevity studies. So I don't know why there's a fly, but if you are not spending time in community with other people, actually can degrade your health quite significantly. So if I was just saying no to all my social plans just because I had to run, I probably would have gotten to that start line and been like, damn, I missed that person's birthday, I missed this, and I would have felt a lot of guilt. A very routine, rigid health person to begin with. Like I have a bedtime, I have a schedule. And so if there's like one night a week when I'm not following that, I didn't find it to like affect my training that much. Also, I wasn't training to BQ or have some serious time. So it all depends on, what you're going for.